In this video, we're gonna go deeper into Nikola's edits again, where I'm gonna show you how you can create this very simple yet premium looking animation. In my last video, I also went over one of Nikola's scenes, which was a little bit more complex. So if you wanna go check that out, there's going to be a button somewhere on the screen right now. And with all of that said, let's dive right into the video. Alright, the first thing we're gonna do is to create a shape layer. So hold your mouse onto this rectangle tool, and now we can choose the rounded rectangle tool. Draw a shape approximately like this. We can crank up the roundness right here. Something like 85 is going to work well. Then right here at the side, we see the shape properties. So let's make sure we unlink the dimensions and scale the y-axis a bit down. And let's actually set the roundness to about 65. And let's also quickly turn off the stroke on this layer too. Right after that, we're going to duplicate this shape layer by hitting Ctrl D on Mac or Ctrl D on Windows. And get up here and switch the color to some dark gray. Right around here, it's good. And now click on this toggle switches / modes option and make sure to track matte the second layer to the first one. Now let's quickly call the first layer a mask. So at the end, it doesn't really matter what the first shape looks like because it's just a mask for all the other layers. So this is practically the base that we're working with right now. And now we're gonna duplicate the second layer one more time, and we're gonna set the fill color to white. I wouldn't really go with too white because it is just a bit too bright. So I'm gonna crank it down a little and click OK. Now we're gonna go up here and hold and click on this rectangle tool right here, and make sure while the shape layer is selected that we click on this mask option right here. Now drag your mouse across the screen and we're gonna create a simple mask like this. And if you were a bit confused up until this point, now you can see what we're trying to do right here. Now I'm gonna click on the second layer here and press T on my keyboard for transparency or opacity, and I'm just gonna dial it down a little so it is a bit transparent right here. We can do the same for this white layer. And now we're ready to design it. So click on this text tool here, click on the screen and start writing your text. It is obviously a bit too big, so we're going to select it and scale it down. And I'm going to change the font to this one, Helvetica. I'll scale it down even more and I'm going to fit it inside this frame right here. The best way to make sure it's right in the middle is to click on this middle align right here, and it's going to be exactly in the middle. I'm going to scale it down even more and actually change it from regular to bold. And also, I don't like that it's fully white colored, so I'm going to shift it down a bit. That's about right. Now we're going to focus on creating these little boxes under this text right here. So choose the rectangle tool and draw a shape again. Click on the fill color up here, and now just make sure it's set to something really dark, not fully black, but just a little above it. Something like this will do, and click OK. And of course, we're going to crank its roundness up to something like 150. I would just like to make it a bit bigger, so we're going to scale it right here. Just a quick tip, always scale your shapes right here in the shape properties, because if you try to scale it right here, you're going to see how distorted the edges become. And that's really ugly, and we don't want to do that. So make sure to keep that in mind while working with shape layers. And I'm going to add a stroke with a width of about 2, and also change it color to a bit grayish, and click on the type tool again and write the text inside. And let me just make sure it's set from bold to light. And now we're going to position it inside the frame and scale it down. I'm actually going to change it to regular because I think it looks better. And another tip that I want to give you while designing basically anything that you can imagine is to always leave enough space for the elements to breathe. And by that I mean, if I scale this text layer up, it doesn't look good now. It's just too cranked up. There's not much space above and under it, and it really gives off that cheap vibe. So what you want to do is make sure everything has space, everything has the room to breathe. Also, always keep everything as aligned as possible. And if you apply all of that, everything is going to give off a much more premium vibe. All right, now we're back at it. And while I'm looking at this, I really want to stretch out this shape layer a little. So again, I'll make sure to use the shape properties right here, unlink the size proportions and stretch it out a bit. Let's now duplicate the shape layer by hitting Ctrl D, and we're going to drag it to the other side. Double click on it and change it to fuck this. I'm going to place it around here. And I'm going to duplicate this shape layer here with the same method and drag it over to the other side. Also make sure you're holding shift when you're dragging things, because if you don't, you're not going to get them aligned well. What I want to do now is to parent all of these text layers with their shape layers. So make sure to take the parent pick whip icon and drag it over to its shape layer. That way, when we decide to move this shape layer, the text moves along with it. And we're going to repeat the same thing with the other text layer. Now I'll select both of the shape layers and I'm going to move them up a little. That's right about it. Next, we're gonna drag in the After Effects logo and place it inside the project panel. We can then grab it and place it into our timeline. Of course, make sure it's above everything else. It's a bit too big, so we're gonna scale it down. And now place it around here. We're gonna scale it down even more. Make sure you're holding shift while doing that. This looks fine now. And again, don't make it too big, because right now all it gives off is cheap vibes. Why? Because it's very close to the edges. And we always wanna make sure when we're designing something that it has has the room to breathe, and this doesn't. And then if you look at this, for example, it has the breathing room, it looks simplistic, minimalistic, it fits well inside a frame, and it just gives off a much more premium vibe. Okay, so now we're gonna click on the type tool again, click on the screen, type After Effects. Obviously, we're gonna scale it down too, and change its color to something more dark. Again, close to black, but not fully. Click OK. All right, there's one more thing that I wanna do, and that is to click on the first shape layer that we have, which is this gray one right here, and add a stroke of about 1 pixel. Change the color to something whitish, and that's it. We have now added a subtle stroke around this shape layer. And right there that we're done designing everything, now we want to make that opening up animation. I'm gonna do it by selecting every layer other than the mask layer and track matting it to the mask layer. And I'm gonna show you exactly why I did this right now. So now that everything is masked by this mask layer, we can now go to the shape properties right here, click on this stopwatch next to the size property to create a keyframe, push it a little bit out, and now we can drag this value all the way down to 0, and right there we're gonna have our shape layer fully animated. Of course, we're not done. I'm just gonna zoom in a little and push this keyframe a bit back. Of course, we're gonna select them and easy ease them with F9, get into the graph editor, select the last keyframe and drag it to the left like this, and of course click on this toggle switches and modes and make sure to enable the motion blur on the mask layer. Right now the animation looks like this. It is a lot smoother than it was before. And now let's focus on animating these shape layers right here. So we have previously parented these text layers to their shapes, and then all we have to do now is to click on each of the shape layers, press S for scale. Right now we can scale it over here because the proportions are linked, set a keyframe, push it a bit further out and scale it down. And then if we look at the last keyframe, the scale is at 100%. Now we're gonna go in between these keyframes and set the scale to something a little bigger than 100%, something like 110 or 115, and then it's gonna scale up and get back to its position. To make it look better, we're obviously gonna easy ease the keyframes. We can of course go to the first keyframe, press T for opacity, set a keyframe, push it a bit out and set it to 0. We can do the same on the text layer as well. Set a keyframe, push it a bit out and place it back to 0. Then we can press U on the shape layer to see all the keyframes that are currently active, and we can simply copy them over to the second one. So click on the second shape layer and we can copy them over, and also repeat the same thing for the other text layer. Of course, we can now close these layers and enable motion blur for each one of them. And of course, right now at the end, we're gonna do a little zoom in. You can either do it by adding a 3D camera. In that situation, we'd have to make every layer 3D so it works, but I have a better method because it doesn't require a camera. We're just simply gonna right click and click on new null object. We're gonna change its color so it's a bit different. And right now we're gonna select every layer that is not parented to any other layer. In this case, it's every layer but these two text layers. And now we're gonna pick whip them to the null object. Now select the null object and press S for scale, set a keyframe, go a bit further, and now we can zoom it in. Of course, I've made a mistake. I didn't parent this layer to the null, so I'm gonna revert everything and parent this one to the null. And now we're gonna scale it up. Then select the keyframes, easy ease, go to the graph, select the last keyframe and drag it to the left. Perhaps even drag the left keyframe towards the middle a bit. Just play around with the graph to see what you like. And now to me, it seems like the shape layer is opening up a bit too quickly. So I'm gonna select every layer, of course, other than the null and the video layer, and drag them a bit forward. And now that we're done with this, now we wanna make sure the background gets blurry as the zoom in is happening. So we're gonna select the video layer, go to the effects and presets tab, search for Gaussian blur effect and double click on it. Now we can set a keyframe right here, go forward and set the blurriness to around 20 to 25. Now press U to see all the keyframes, perhaps drag it out a little, select them, easy ease, and right at the very end I want to add deep glow to it to spice it all up. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna select every layer that is parented to the null layer, and I'm basically gonna unparent them. Why? Because I want to pre-compose all of these layers and add deep glow to them without applying the deep glow effect to the video layer. So we're gonna press Ctrl-Shift-C to pre-compose it, press OK, and now we're gonna parent everything to the null again. That way the movement is gonna remain the same, but now we can get into the pre-composition, right click and add a new adjustment layer. Place it above everything else, and now we can add deep glow to it. Of course, this is a bit too much, so we're gonna dial the exposure down, perhaps something like 0.05, and I'll just make sure everything is a little darker color because deep glow made it a bit more bright. And with a little bit of adjusting, your scene should look more or less like this. Make sure to pause for a second and subscribe to the channel because my analytics tab says over 85% of you watching are not even subscribed. Also, comment down below if you'd like me to go even deeper on some of Nikola's other animations, which we're gonna cover in some of the next videos. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.